What's going on, guys? Billy here, and without a doubt, one of the most frequently asked questions I've been getting about the 8K version of the Autel EVO II is why would I need to shoot video in such a high resolution like 8K? With 1080p being the industry standard and with 4K having 4 times as many pixels as that 1080p frame, why would I need to shoot my video in 8K? Well, there's certainly benefits to doing so, but those benefits come with trade-offs. So what I want to do in today's video is go over all the benefits and all the drawbacks of shooting 8K video with the Autel EVO II, and I'm also going to go into depth about whether or not this drone actually shoots 8K video, true 8K video, because I think Autel is fudging the numbers just a little bit. So first, let's set a basis. I've put together a simple graphic showing the difference between 1080p, 2.7K, 4K, 6K, and 8K. These are all of the available resolutions on the Autel EVO II mounted with that 8K camera. Now, down in the bottom right corner of each frame is the dimensions, and in the top right corner is a total of how many pixels are in each of these frames. I'm sure that you guys have seen a graphic like this made in the past, but seeing the difference between the amount of pixels that make up a 1080p and an 8K video clip is crazy to see broken down like this. In fact, if it was our goal to export in 1080p, but we were going to shoot in 8K, if we move that 1080p frame right to the center of the 8K frame, that's exactly how much room we'd have to crop in on that 8K frame in order to get a full resolution output when exporting in 1080p. So with the general understanding of the available resolutions on the 8K version of the Autel EVO II, I now want to get into some of the pros and the cons, the benefits and the trade-offs to shooting in such a high resolution like 8K on this drone. Now, I want to start off with the cons or the trade-offs because I feel like if you're considering whether or not you should shoot 8K or not, there are certain things that I'm going to cover in this portion of the video that you can instantly say, okay, 8K is not for me. I'm going to try a smaller size resolution when I'm shooting video. So first up, of course, because these files are going to have so much more detail in them, they have so many more pixels that make up the frame, you're going to have to deal with larger file sizes. Now, I went and shot a 1-minute clip on the Autel EVO II in each of the different available resolutions at 24 frames per second, and I came up with these file sizes for each. You'll notice that it incrementally goes up from 1080p to 2.7K to 4K and 6K, but then when we jump from 6K to 8K, the difference in file size really isn't all that big, and this is our first hint at why I don't think this drone actually technically shoots 8K video, but we'll get into that in a little bit once we begin to look and we start to pixel peep at the different frames. So yeah, of course, you're going to have to deal with larger file sizes, and this means you're going to need a big SD card here inside of the drone. Just for example, I'm flying with a 128 gig SD card, and I can store about 130 minutes of 8K footage here on the drone. So you do want a larger SD card if you're going to shoot in a larger resolution, and also you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of storage on hand to put all that video on, like an archive drive or an external hard drive. So yeah, you're going to need a lot of storage for the large file sizes. Now, moving on, of course, because we've got larger file sizes and we've got larger resolutions, we're also going to have longer export times when we're using really any editing software from Final Cut Pro to DaVinci Resolve to Premiere Pro. So for me, what I found with my spec'd out 15-inch MacBook Pro, I'll put the specs up here on the screen, I was able to render 1 minute of 8K video from this drone in 23 minutes. So I took an 8K clip, I put it into an 8K timeline, I exported that 8K video, and it took 23 minutes to render and export 1 minute of footage. Now, I did upload that first flight with the Autel EVO II here in 8K, so that was a 19-minute long 8K video. It came out to be 33 gigs, and it took 5.5 hours to export. So just know that amongst the large file sizes, you also need a pretty hefty computer in order to handle the 8K files, because the render time as well as the export times are going to be longer. Now, I should probably also mention, with all of that said about the larger file sizes and the longer render and export times, there's a possibility that your machine, the computer you use to view and edit your footage, flat out might not be able to handle the 8K resolution. I told you guys that I had very long render and export times using my MacBook, and I feel like my MacBook Pro is fairly spec'd out. It can handle 4K footage with no problem whatsoever, but once I try to edit or view that 8K video, it totally just shuts down. It's almost unusable. So I'd hate for you to go out and shoot a ton of 8K video and get home and not not be able to edit it, let alone be able to view it on your computer. It would kind of be a waste. If you guys are interested, I'll throw some links in the description to footage I'm going to share with you later of some different 8K clips taken with the Autel EVO. If you want, go ahead and download those 8K clips and give it a try on your computer. See if you can edit it, see if you can even view it, because that'll be a good telltale sign of whether or not you should be shooting 8K video or not. Now, moving on to the fourth drawback to shooting 8K video on the Autel EVO II, and actually this is true for really any camera that you use. As you begin to go higher with the resolution, you begin to lose out on frame rate options. So let's say we're shooting in 1080p at the base resolution. We can choose between 24 frames per second all the way up to 120 frames per second and everything in between. Now, when we go all the way up to 8K, we've only got the choice of 24 or 25 frames per second, not even 30 frames per second. So it's typical as we're shooting in this higher resolution, the processor on board the camera, or in this case the drone, is not going to be able to handle 8K resolution at 120 frames per second, so you've got to choose a lower frame rate. To me, it's really not a deal breaker because I usually just shoot in the highest resolution at a standard 30 or 24 frames per second, depending on the project I'm working on. And this is because with a drone, I like to capture as much detail as possible because typically I'm further away from the subject I'm shooting and I just want to have as much detail in that image as possible. Now, we've got two more drawbacks that I want to discuss about shooting 8K with the Autel EVO II, and both of them are like, I guess, common arguments people would make about these higher resolutions. The first of which is that your eyes really won't notice a difference between 8K video and say 6K video or even 1080p video. Like if I pulled it up on my iPad right here and you showed me an 8K video clip and then a 1080p video clip, I probably wouldn't notice the difference. If I had a phone, which most of you are probably watching this on right now, again, I probably wouldn't notice the difference between an 8K video and a 1080p video. Now, if you had a massive 8K, 70-inch display, 70-inch TV, I understand you might be able to see the difference between an 8K video clip and a 1080p video clip, but chances are on most of the devices people are watching it on, it's just not going to make that big of a difference, no matter what resolution you export it in, as long as it's 1080p. Now, the final thing I have on this list, and this is kind of what I hinted at in the beginning of the video, is this even true 8K that the Autel EVO II is shooting? Like, we've got a half-inch sensor in here. Of course, it's able to shoot 48 megapixels, and it also can shoot 8K video, but is that true 8K video? We saw the first sign of it not being true 8K video with the different file sizes for 6K and 8K being very similar. They're only like 2 or 3 megabytes off in the various tests that I've ran. But also when we begin to pixel peep, you can definitely see that there's really not a lot of difference between the 6K and the 8K resolution, which we're gonna get into as we go through some of the pros. So moving into the benefits that come along with shooting in such a high resolution like 8K on the Autel EVO II, the first of which is pretty self-explanatory. It's the fact that when you're shooting in a high resolution, you're capturing much more detail. I think that the graphic I showed you in the beginning of this video, showcasing the pixels that make up a 1080p frame and an 8K frame, really do help you understand just how much more detail is going to be present in that 8K frame. And as I show you guys some different video examples, like this one taken in 1080p, and then bumping it up to 2.7K, and then 4K, and then 6K, and 8K, while this is the same frame and while it's of course taken from the same exact spot, because we're here on YouTube, you guys probably couldn't tell a massive difference between each of the different clips. You see, this is why there's such a strong argument against shooting in these higher resolutions, because as soon as we begin to talk about the benefits, we loop right back around to the cons, and I say that you're not going to be able to notice the difference here on YouTube, likely on the device that you're watching. Now, I will leave a link down in the description for you guys to go ahead and download every single video clip I showcase in this video so that you guys can download them for yourself, look at them in their full resolution, uncompressed, on your desktop or on your laptop, whatever you've got, so you can see the difference in the quality, because here on YouTube, you're just not going to see the difference. Now, where you will see the difference is when we zoom into it. So what I did is I took a frame from each of the different resolutions, and then I blew it up by 800%. So if we look at the first frame taken from the 1080p video clip, this is just a blurry mess. I mean, I understand what's here. There's buildings, there's trees, but there's just not a whole lot of detail here. Now, moving up to 2.7K, we definitely begin to see a little bit more information. I can start to make out the individual windows. I can see some of the lines on the back of the building. Moving on to 4K, this is where I begin to see a little bit of detail and some different shadowing features in the trees. So there is definitely more detail here. In this image, of course, it's in 4K. 4K. Bumping up to 6K though, this is where we get a lot of resolution, especially in the detail in the buildings. I feel like I can see each individual window and all the shades very clearly. I can tell which window might have shades open, which one might have the shades drawn down. But here's something interesting. When we go from 6K to 8K, there is just really not a big difference. I'll put them side by side here on the screen for you guys, and I really just don't notice a big difference between the two frames. I mean, they kind of show the same exact detail. You see, it's because of that exact frame that I just showed you guys, the difference between 6K and 8K, that I almost know that this drone isn't shooting true 8K, and I think that everybody low-key knew right off the bat, because of the small half-inch sensor in here, it wasn't actually going to shoot true 8K video. Of course, they're taking advantage of the quad Bayer sensor, so we've got more filters to interpret the light a little bit differently here on this drone's camera, and I really could go into a lot more depth about this, especially talking about the photos, the 48 megapixel photos, but I don't want to really take up the whole amount of time to talk about it in this video, so let me know if you guys want to know a little bit more about that subject. But I think that it's fairly easy to explain. It just isn't true 8K. Like, I could take a 1080p video clip and I could export it as 4K, and would it be a 4K clip in the end? Yes, it would be. It technically would be 3840 by 2160. And I think the same thing is going on here. Like, despite being a resolution of 7680 by 4320, I feel like it doesn't actually have all the pixels that should be there. So just be wary that this drone, despite it saying it has 8K, I feel like it's probably more closer to 4K, maybe a little bit better detail than 4K, closer to 6K. I know that that's a little bit confusing. But moving on from here, right? What are some more benefits to shooting in 8K? I know I just went off a tangent there. The first of which is that you can downsample that footage. So despite whether or not you're going to export in 4K or 1080p, if you shoot in a higher resolution and you downsample that footage, the end product is just going to look better. Like, for example, everything I've shot with this drone up until this point has been in 8K at 24 frames per second, and I don't think I'm really ever going to upload a video in 8K, but I'll take this footage and I'll downsample it down to whatever I export in, which will typically be around 4K. So in the future, I see myself bouncing around between 8K and 6K, shooting all of this high resolution video, and then being able to downsample that down to 4K to just make the image look sharper. Now, moving on to the third benefit that comes along with shooting in a higher resolution, it's the fact that you're able to zoom and crop in on the image without losing detail. So you noticed that when I zoomed into 800% on a 1080p image, it looked horrible. It was so blurry, you couldn't even really tell what was going on. You had the general structure of the buildings, but like, there was no detail in that shot. Now, typically, I would never zoom into a shot 800%. That would just kind of be like a death sentence. You would never want to do that. It wouldn't look good. But if you zoomed in to 110% or scaled it up to 120 or even 200%, the video will still look great when you export it. And that's if you downsample the footage. So if I shot in 8K and I wanted to export in 1080p, I could zoom in really far on that image and still preserve a lot of the detail. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in post, especially when you're editing and you're downsampling to a smaller resolution. And that's something I really like to have, knowing that I can crop in if I have to. Now, if zooming in and cropping after the fact is not something that you want to do, and you want to take advantage of that crop right there in the field while you're shooting, well, this drone comes equipped with digital zoom, which can go from 1x all the way out to 8x. So it takes advantage of that 8K resolution and can give you a pretty clear view, in my opinion, of something that's really far away. Now, would I ever shoot like this? No, because not only is it kind of blurry, but also it's insanely hard to control. Like, with a drone that has that focal length, and especially in windy conditions, it's just not going to give you usable footage. But I can see this being used in a lot of different use case scenarios, search and rescue, inspection purposes. There's a lot of different things that this could be used for, but shooting good video is definitely not one of them. It is kind of cool to do though. Now, just to give you guys an example, right? This is a shot of the art museum all the way down the Ben Franklin Parkway. And sure, we can zoom all the way in on that image, and yeah, we can see the art museum in its full glory, but why would you not just fly down the road and get closer to it and get a nicer image? I understand that the digital zoom will give you like a longer focal length, and now it's a little bit wider, but it just gives you such a better picture. So look, at the end of the day, while the digital zoom is cool and could be made useful on certain scenarios, I really wouldn't recommend using it all that often to shoot good video. So I hope that by now you guys have a really good understanding of the different benefits and drawbacks that come along with shooting 8K video on the Autel EVO II. I've still got 3 benefits I want to cover here, but they really aren't as substantial as the first 4 I covered. So being able to get more detail out of your image, and also being able to crop and zoom both in camera and in post. list. Those are really the main benefits you get from shooting in a high resolution, but I figured I'd add these in here at the end. So coming in at number 5 on the list, we get a sharper still frame from this 8K video. So if you're taking video all day long and you forgot to shoot photos, but you want to share some photos with people, you can take really high resolution frames from that video and edit them in a high resolution. You're not suffering from like a low resolution 1080p file, whereas with those photo files, you're usually dealing with more resolution. Moving on to number 6 here, you're future-proofing all the footage that you shoot. So in 4 or 5 years now, when everybody has high resolution displays, they can take full advantage of the 4K, 6K, and 8K video that you shoot depending on what screen size they're watching on. So if you shoot in this higher resolution, you're future-proofing everything that you shoot, and you're not going to have to roll back to 1080p video that might look a little bit fuzzy or blurry depending on where you play it. Now finally, number 7 on my list here, this really just engulfs and encompasses everything I talked about in the benefits portion of this video. You get so much more flexibility when shooting 8K video or just in general a higher resolution video on the Autel EVO II. It gives me more room to crop. It gives me more room to share in different resolutions. It also gives me more room to play on a big screen if I wanted to, whereas if I shot in 1080p, I would never be able to up-res that footage and be able to share it on different mediums. So I like the flexibility, and I'd rather take a hit in terms of performance and storage so that I have that flexibility moving forward. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions about 8K down in the comment section below. Remember, I am going to leave a link in the description to all the video files I showcased in this video. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.